Today we're tackling the link between stress and blood sugar. And we've got this article, How Stress Affects Blood Sugar
Yeah.
and What You Can Do About It, as our guide. It's pretty eye-opening stuff, even for someone like me who thought I had a decent handle on this whole stress thing.
Yeah, it's a connection that a lot of people don't really think about. We all know stress is bad, but how it actually messes with our blood sugar, that's where things get really interesting.
So the article jumps right into this fight or flight response, which, vaguely rings a bell from high school biology. But can we break down why this primal instinct might be, backfiring a little bit in our modern lives?
Sure, so imagine, right? You're face to face with a saber-toothed tiger, like way back when. Your body's like, oh no, and it just floods with this hormone cortisol.
Cortisol, right, okay.
Right, and that's like a huge signal to your liver basically saying, hey, pump out the glucose, we need energy now. Like, you're either going to fight this tiger or run like crazy, you need that fuel.
Right. Makes sense in that scenario.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Our bodies basically react the same way to a traffic jam or a work deadline.
So our bodies are stuck in, permanent panic mode, even when there's no tiger.
Pretty much. And that's where the trouble starts. Imagine your liver constantly getting that release the glucose signal. It's like nonstop.
Like revving your car engine constantly.
Yeah.
Something's got to give.
Exactly. So chronic stress basically means chronic cortisol, which means your liver's pumping out glucose like it's going out of style.
Okay, so we've got all this extra glucose floating around, but the article also mentions that cortisol messes with insulin. And insulin's the hormone that helps our cells actually use that glucose, right?
Right. And it's not just about having too much glucose. Cortisol actually makes our cells less sensitive to insulin. Like, imagine insulin is the key that unlocks your cells to let the glucose in. But cortisol is basically jamming that lock, making it harder for the glucose to get where it needs to go. And that's what we call insulin resistance.
So we've got all this extra glucose thanks to our stressed out liver. But our cells can't even use it efficiently because cortisol is messing with the insulin. No wonder blood sugar gets all out of whack.
It's a whole mess. And to make things even more complicated, the article also talks about how cortisol can actually decrease the amount of glucose our muscles use.
Oh, so even more excess glucose hanging out in the bloodstream.
Exactly. And that's when things can start to get a little dicey, especially if you're already prone to blood sugar issues or you have diabetes.
So for someone with diabetes, this is kind of a double whammy.
Exactly. Stress just makes it that much harder to manage blood sugar. You know you're already working to keep things stable, and then stress comes along and throws a big hormonal wrench in the works.
Wow. And it can even turn into a vicious cycle, right? Because high blood sugar can then lead to more stress and anxiety.
Absolutely. It's like a roller coaster you can't get off of.
Okay, so we've established that chronic stress can lead to some serious blood sugar shenanigans. But how can we tell if this is actually happening in our own bodies? Are there any, warning signs we should be looking out for?
Definitely. Like, if your blood sugar readings are all over the place and you can't figure out why, especially if those swings happen during stressful times, that's a big red flag.
So paying attention to those patterns, especially if you're monitoring your blood sugar, that can be really telling. What about people who aren't regularly checking their blood sugar, though? Any other clues they should be looking for?
Oh yeah, for sure. Increased thirst or having to pee more often than usual, that can be a sign your blood sugar's up. And if you're sticking to your normal routine, like eating well, exercising, but you're still feeling wiped out and irritable all the time, that could be another sign that stress is messing with your blood sugar.
Interesting. So it's not always just about the numbers. It's about tuning into how your body feels overall.
Exactly. Our bodies try to tell us these things, we just have to listen.
So let's talk solutions. The article recommends a two-pronged approach, managing the stress and then supporting healthy blood sugar metabolism. Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. It's like you need to stop adding fuel to the fire, which is the stress, but you also need to actually work on putting the fire out, which is the blood sugar dysregulation. And just like with a real fire, the sooner you act, the better.
Okay, I'm ready to put out that fire. Let's start with stress management.
Yeah.
The article lists a bunch of techniques, but honestly, some of them feel kind of generic, like take a deep breath or go for a walk. Like, that's great and all, but what if my stress is deeper than that? What if it's, chronic job insecurity or serious family issues?
Oh, I totally hear you. Those surface level tips, they don't really cut it when you're dealing with some serious real life stress. That's why it's so important to actually figure out what's at the root of your stress, not just like slapping a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
So how do we do that? Is there some kind of magic formula for unraveling those deeper stress knots?
Well, there's no magic bullet, unfortunately, but there are some pretty powerful techniques that can really help. One that's been super helpful for me, both personally and with my clients, is journaling.
Journaling.
Yeah, I know it sounds simple, but it's amazing how much clarity you can get just by, writing down your thoughts and feelings.
So it's not just about, like, venting. There's
Yeah.
an actual strategy to journaling for stress management.
Exactly. Try this. For a week or two, keep what I call a stress journal. So basically, every time something stressful happens, big or small, write it down. And then also write down how you're feeling, both physically and emotionally. And if you happen to be monitoring your blood sugar, jot down those readings too, around the same time.
Oh, so you can start to see if there's a pattern, like, oh, every time I have a meeting with my boss, my blood sugar spikes.
Exactly. And once you see those patterns, then you can actually start brainstorming ways to, manage those specific triggers. Maybe it's taking 5 minutes to meditate before a big meeting, or maybe it's setting some better boundaries with a colleague who always pushes your buttons, or hey, maybe it's something even bigger like looking into a career change if your job is just a constant source of stress.
That's a great point. Sometimes stress management isn't just about coping mechanisms. It's about making some bigger life changes. But, let's be realistic. Not everyone can just up and quit their job.
Right, of course. It's all about finding what works in your specific situation. And even those small changes, they can make a huge difference. Could you delegate a task that's stressing you out? Could you squeeze in a 15-minute walk during your lunch break? Little things like that, they really add up over time.
So it's about being proactive, not just reactive.
Hmm.
I like that. Now, flipping over to the other side of that coin, how do we cool down those blood sugar flames? The article talks a lot about diet, but it feels a little overwhelming, honestly. Where do we even begin?
I know, right? Diet advice can feel like information overload sometimes. But let's try to break it down into something more manageable. So the foundation is really focusing on whole, unprocessed foods. Think like colorful veggies, lean protein, healthy fats, and of course those good, slow-burning complex carbs we talked about earlier.
Got it. So basically, ditch the processed snacks, cut back on the sugary drinks, maybe swap that white bread for some whole grain, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about crowding out those foods that send your blood sugar soaring and replacing them with things that actually keep you feeling full and give you sustained energy.
Makes sense. Now, what about those supplements the article mentions? Like GlucoTrust. Are those worth looking into?
It's definitely interesting. Some of those ingredients, like Genema sylvestre and cinnamon, they've actually shown some promise in studies for supporting healthy blood sugar. But it's super important to remember that supplements aren't like a magic bullet.
Right. They're not a replacement for a healthy lifestyle. And, probably a good idea to chat with your doctor before starting any new supplements, right?
Absolutely. They can help figure out if it's right for you and make sure it doesn't interact with any medications you're taking.
Speaking of healthy habits, I think a lot of people struggle with making those changes stick,
Hmm.
long term. Like we all start off strong with this great new diet or exercise plan, and then life happens and suddenly we're back to our old patterns.
Yeah.
Any advice for avoiding that whole all or nothing mentality?
Yes, that all or nothing trap is so common, and it usually backfires because, then you just feel like a failure. I think the key is to shift away from that rigid mindset and focus more on building sustainable habits. So instead of trying to change your whole diet overnight, start with just one small change.
Like swapping that sugary afternoon soda for a glass of water.
Exactly. Or, adding a 10-minute walk to your day. And then really celebrate those small wins because they build momentum and they make you feel so much more empowered.
I love that. Progress, not perfection. Okay, so speaking of progress, the article also really emphasizes blood sugar monitoring, especially for people who are dealing with stress. But let's be honest, all that poking and pricking can be kind of overwhelming.
I know, it can definitely be a barrier for some folks, but luckily technology is making it way easier and less invasive these days. Have you heard of those continuous glucose monitors?
Vaguely. Are those the tiny sensors you wear, like on your arm?
Yeah, they basically track your glucose levels all the time and then send that data to your phone or a little device. No more finger pricking.
Wow, that's amazing. So you can actually see how your blood sugar is trending throughout the day.
Exactly. It takes out all the guesswork and give you all this amazing data on how your body's responding to, different foods, activities, and yep, even stress.
It's like having a personal blood sugar detective on your wrist.
Haha, exactly. And the more information you have, the more equipped you are to make those, smart choices about your diet, your stress management, and just your overall health. It's about having that knowledge and using it to empower yourself.
Which is what this whole deep dive is about, right?
Yeah.
Empowering ourselves to actually take control of our health instead of just passively accepting whatever, our genes or circumstances throw at us.
100%. It's about moving beyond just managing symptoms and actually getting to the root of the problem. And in a lot of cases, that root, it's stress.
But, it's important to remember that stress isn't inherently a bad thing. It's all about how we perceive it and how we respond to it.
So true. It's about reframing our relationship with stress, seeing it as a challenge, maybe even an opportunity to grow, rather than something that we just have to fear and avoid.
Like turning that whole fight or flight response into a thrive and flourish response. Finding that sweet spot where we can actually use the energy of stress without letting it run our lives.
Hmm.
Now, this article focuses mostly on stress and blood sugar, but I'm curious, does this whole stress response affect other areas of our health too?
Oh, absolutely. Chronic stress is like this domino effect. It can trigger a whole cascade of negative consequences all over your body. It's been linked to, everything from heart disease and digestive problems to a weakened immune system and even faster aging.
Wow, it really is a whole body issue.
Yeah.
So managing stress, it's not just about feeling calmer and keeping our blood sugar happy. It's about protecting our entire well-being.
Exactly. It's about living longer and living better, having that energy and vitality and mental clarity to actually, enjoy your life.
Now, before we wrap things up, there's one more point I want to touch on. The article mentions that everyone reacts to stress differently. So what works for one person might not work for someone else.
Right. Totally. We're all unique, and what helps one person de-stress might not be as effective for another. That's why it's so important to experiment a little and find what actually resonates with you.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. It's about
Yeah.
building your own, personalized stress-busting toolkit.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey. What works for you today, it might change as you learn and grow. So be curious, be open to new things, and most importantly, listen to your body. It'll tell you what it needs.
Okay, so before we move on, I want to leave our listeners with a little something to think about. If you had to choose just one thing to focus on this week to manage stress and support healthy blood sugar, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let me think for a second.
We'll give you a minute to ponder that. And
Yeah.
for everyone listening, we encourage you to do the same. What's that one thing you're going to prioritize this week?
It's a question worth exploring for sure.
Absolutely. Sometimes the answers we find can really surprise us. Okay, have you had enough time to think about it?
I think so, but it wasn't an easy choice. There's so much good stuff we talked about today.
I know, right? It's like we've laid out this whole buffet of healthy habits.
But if I had to pick just one thing to focus on this week,
Drum roll, please.
it would be getting enough sleep.
Sleep. Really. I got to say, that wasn't my first thought either, but okay, I'm listening. Why sleep? Out of all the things we talked about today, why is that your top pick?
It might seem kind of basic, but seriously, we really underestimate how powerful sleep is. It's like the foundation for, well, everything, both our bodies and our minds, like hitting that reset button.
So it's more than just, feeling well rested. There's a deeper connection here to stress and blood sugar.
Oh, absolutely. When we don't get enough sleep, it's like our bodies are stuck in this constant state of stress, or cortisol levels just stay high, and that makes regulating blood sugar way harder. Plus, lack of sleep messes with our hunger hormones too, and that just makes us crave all the sugary, high-carb stuff. Not exactly helpful for blood sugar control, right?
Yeah. Oh, so it's like a double whammy. Stress hormones are up, willpower is down, and suddenly that late-night ice cream doesn't sound so bad after all.
Exactly. But when we actually prioritize sleep, we're giving our bodies that chance to repair, restore, and just get back in balance. Those stress hormones go down, insulin sensitivity goes up, and we're way better at resisting those cravings.
So it's not just about blood sugar control. It's like setting ourselves up to handle stress better throughout the whole day.
Exactly. And come on. Getting enough sleep just makes us feel better, period. More energy, better focus, and way less likely to snap at our coworkers or our families.
Yeah, that's definitely a win-win for everyone. But okay, let's be real. A lot of our listeners are busy people. Jobs, family, everything in between. How do we make sleep a priority without feeling like we're falling behind on everything else?
It's tough, I know. But even small things can help. Like, start by creating a little bedtime routine, a warm bath, a good book, maybe some calming music, whatever works for you. And definitely avoid screen time for at least an hour before bed. That blue light is a real sleep killer.
Oh yeah, guilty as charged. I'm definitely one of those people scrolling on my phone in bed.
Yeah.
No wonder I have trouble sleeping sometimes.
It's a common habit. And speaking of habits, try to stick to a consistent sleep schedule, even on the weekends. Go to bed and wake up around the same time every day. That'll help regulate your body's natural sleep-wake cycle, so falling asleep and waking up is way easier.
Consistency is key, even with sleep.
Got it.
It's like sending a clear signal to our bodies. Okay, time to wind down, time to recharge.
Exactly. And, if you're still struggling, don't be afraid to talk to your doctor. There could be some underlying sleep issues that need to be addressed.
That's a good reminder. Always better to check with a professional if you're not sure what's going on. Well, I think we've covered a lot today, from the nitty-gritty science of stress all the way to the power of sleep.
It's been a fun deep dive.
And hopefully our listeners are feeling a little more empowered to take charge of their stress and blood sugar, starting with those precious hours of shut-eye.
Remember, knowledge is power, but it's the action that makes all the difference.
So to everyone listening, we challenge you to put what you've learned into practice. Start small. Maybe ditch that sugary evening snack, or take a walk at lunch, or set a firm bedtime. Whatever feels doable for you.
And hey, you don't have to go it alone. Reach out to a friend, family member, or a healthcare professional for support. We're all in this together, right?
Totally. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of stress and blood sugar.
It's been great exploring this with you.
The pleasure was all ours. Until next time, everyone, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay well rested.